Hey, what's up guys, TechTime here and I'm back again with a brand new video. So before I begin, as always, I want to thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate you all if you subscribe to the channel. If you haven't, that's fine. Go ahead and consider doing so. A lot of great content covering this phone and other devices will be coming out really soon. So with that being said, now that I've spent 48 hours with the Samsung Galaxy A16 5G, I have a couple of things that I want to share with you guys. So beginning with basically the changes that they made from the previous generation. So let's start with the design itself. Obviously, not much has changed look-wise. Now, it does have this kind of diamond pattern. I think that's basically one of the biggest changes that they made in the design. There's another one that's more so major, but we'll talk about that later in a little bit. But basically, this diamond pattern is only apparent, I think, if you get like a lighter color, or if you get this darker color, if you shine it under decent sunlight conditions, you'll be able to kind of look it apart. But besides that, it still is this glossy material that they have on the back that will catch fingerprint, and it's somewhat slippery. Now, the back also has your triple camera setup, which the main sensor still has a 50 megapixel sensor. It's slightly larger than the previous generation. We'll talk about that once we reach the kind of camera discussion of this video. And so the bigger major change, as you guys can see at the bottom of the phone, you no longer have a headphone jack. The previous A15 did have one. You still get the USB-C port at the bottom with your 25 watt of fast charging, no wireless charging of any sort, and you also have your bottom facing speaker and a microphone. Now, this may bother some certain demographics, but I think the majority would be fine with no headphone jack. So I don't know if this was sort of like a money-saving move by Samsung, but hey, you no longer have a headphone jack. So if you look at the right hand side, the same formula from the previous generation: power button / fingerprint sensor, volume up and down, clicky buttons, fingerprint sensor works fairly well, and it still has that same indentation on the sides that leads to the power button and your volume up and down. It still is made out of plastic all the way around, and I don't think that's going to be durable at all. But yeah, essentially that's the kind of big story behind the design. It's definitely incremental changes. They removed stuff more than they added stuff. And is the design alone going to be a big reason why you should upgrade? Probably not. So let's go ahead and switch the conversation and talk a little bit about the display of the A16. So it does have a 6.7-inch 2340 by 1080p, and it is a Super AMOLED display with 90 Hz of refresh rate, 800 nits of maximum peak brightness, 86% screen to body ratio, and 385 pixels per inch as far as your PPI density goes. Now, all the technical stuff aside, this still is this phone's biggest asset. This is such a good display. Even under bright sunlight conditions, it handles its own. It's not 2000 nits of peak brightness or 1500 nits of peak brightness, but I think 800 nits is going to be plenty for pretty much most people, so I'm fine with that. So as far as your refresh rate, you can mess with that in the settings, and you can change it from the standard 60 Hz to 90 Hz. And I feel like the difference between 90 Hz and 120 Hz is not that significant that it would bother a lot of people. I found that 90 Hz refresh rate was good enough for me, and I feel like it's going to be good enough for most people. So for a phone that is technically a sub $200 phone, you'll be fine. Bottom line is this is a great display. Very similar to the previous generation. I do have to add that this time around it is slightly less reflective than the previous generation, so thumbs up for Samsung for kind of fixing the reflective issue that I had with the A15. So watching videos, browsing the web, going through social media is going to be fine on this phone. Now, as far as the speaker goes, it is definitely slightly better than the previous generation, which is not really a high ground to clear, but it's better than the previous generation. It still is not as loud as I would like it to be, or not as crispy as I would like it to be. So go ahead and take a listen to it, and I'll give you guys a final word on it.
Just looking at it, if you hide the Apple logo, you'll be able to tell that it's an iPhone. So the back, it is made out of this kind of soft glass material, and it also houses your triple camera setup with your LED flash and your LiDAR sensor and a microphone as well. We're going to have a whole conversation about the camera here later on in the video, so just be a little bit patient and stay with me. But the big deal about this new design...
So it's definitely a slightly incremental speaker upgrade. So now I would like to kind of shift the conversation and talk a little bit about the performance of the A16 5G. Now, mind you, the version that I have is the international version that comes with 8 GB of RAM and 256 GB of storage. So the processor of choice this time around was the Exynos 1330 based on a 5nm architecture, octa-core, 5000 mAh battery, like I stated, 8 GB of RAM and 256 GB of storage. So when I did my benchmark testing, Geekbench gave me a single core of 965, and a multi-core of 2079. Now, putting the technical specs to the side and the kind of synthetic benchmarks to the side, I do have to say when it comes to the daily tasks, this phone performed like any phone should, which is more than acceptable, more than respectable. So the daily tasks like the phone app, the messaging app, browsing the web, doing the light tasks on this phone was no problem at all. I didn't really get a lot of stutters, lags, or even like glitches. So far, works like a charm. When it comes to gaming, also lighter titles would be fine on this phone. It played well, there was no overheating. And of course, obviously, if you switch to more heavy demanding games that require a lot of GPU power, you're gonna get some kind of frame rate lag. And you're not gonna have the best experience per se, but that doesn't mean that these games will not be playable. They still work fine on this sub $200 device. So now I want to switch to a bigger conversation, which is the camera. And this is always a popular topic when it comes to smartphones in general. So this time around, you still have a main sensor of a 50 megapixel at f1.8 aperture. You don't get optical image stabilization. I kind of understand for a $200 phone. You get a 5 megapixel f2.2 aperture ultra wide and a 2 megapixel macro sensor that is absolutely useless. You also get a maximum capability of shooting at 1080p at 30 frames per second, so no 4K video. Again, that's fine. It hit the basics, which we're good on that. You also have a 13 megapixel front-facing camera that can also shoot at 1080p at 30 frames per second. So when it comes to these types of stuff, this phone, the camera at least on it covers the basics. Now, if we look at the image quality, I can tell you right now, if you have expectation that this camera is going to be fantastic, calm down, relax. It's only a $200 phone, so set expectations when it comes to the camera performance in general. I did notice kind of a lag when switching between the main sensor and the ultra wide, but it's nothing that I couldn't in general handle. You can wait a little extra second, you'll be fine. It's not the end of the world. When it comes to image quality from the 48 hours that I've spent with this phone, I can tell you that, again, they're fine. They will meet your basic needs. This phone takes some decent pictures for the price at a good lighting condition. The dynamic range on here is also fine. There's slight noise in the picture. They're not as bright, not as contrasty, and not as vivid. But again, not the end of the world. It still hits the basic quality that you will find in a phone for this price point, of course. And my bottom line conclusion as far as me using the phone for 48 hours is the following. Obviously, this phone is made for a certain demographics. Not everyone is going to be wanting to jump the gun and just go ahead and buy this phone. But if you come from sort of the previous generation, the A15, I would not upgrade just yet. I don't see the value to upgrade this phone right now. However, if you come from the A14 and you still want something that is affordable and still reliable and does your basic needs, then I don't think you will be disappointed at all with the Galaxy A16. Performance-wise, it's definitely better than the previous generation. The speaker is better. The display is ever so slightly better. But yeah, overall, this phone will definitely meet your basic needs in a solid smartphone for 200 bucks. So with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a thumbs up. Let's have a conversation in the comments below, and I will catch you guys in the next one.